Good morning and welcome to part 3 of our Public Works Contracting series. This one is entitled Managing Your First Project, and this wraps up the series with Ed Duarte. My name is James Forrest. I am the Program Coordinator for Norcal PTAC. I'll talk about us in a second. Ed Duarte is our Construction and Public Works Specialist. You are in excellent hands with him. I will hand things over to him real quick. I just want to talk about PTAC real quick. We are the Northern California Procurement Technical Assistance Center. We provide free assistance to businesses looking to get some help with selling goods and services to the government. We are hosted by the Humboldt State University Sponsored Programs Foundation. If you can see that red star on the map, that is where I'm sitting in California, surrounded by our service area here in green. We are funded by the Defense Logistics Agency, the DLA, it's a federal program, as well as a state program, GoBiz. We also get extra local grant sources from other places. And in 2020, we helped our clients spend more than $314 million. It really is more than that. This was the figure we had at the time. So this number is constantly increasing. It's twice than what we did in 2019. So if you are looking for small business assistance for government contracting and you're in our service area, you've come to the right place. If you'd like to sign up for our counseling, because here's the services that we offer to our clients. The first two we offer just to clients, and the third we offer to everyone. So one-on-one counseling. Ed Duarte is a procurement specialist. We also have a team of about 7 other procurement specialists who can meet with you individually once you apply to go over the topics ranging from preparing capability statements, getting certifications, government marketplace research, bid proposals, compliance, just about everything related to government contracting, contract vehicles, things like that. And for those clients, we can also do custom bid matching. And this is pretty neat. Basically, you'll get, once you set up your criteria with your procurement specialists, in your inbox, you'll find all the opportunities that match those criteria, bid request proposals. So you can really be on that and start preparing your bid right away, be in that first wave of responders, get your foot in the door. Third thing we do, like I said, all of them are free, but this one is also available to anyone, whether or not you're in our service area in Northern California, and that's resources and trainings. Typically during non-COVID times, we also do them in person, but these days they're all virtual, as you might expect. And we've been doing a lot of them, and we will continue to do a lot of them. We've ramped up our trainings a lot, so I hope you will join us for future events. You can also find all past events that we've done in the past 3 or 4 years on our website at norcalptac.org. This website, I have to say I'm a little biased, but it is awesome. It's chock full of great resources, information on not just on our program, but how to succeed in the government marketplace. And it has all of these webinars archived, the slides and the YouTube videos going back into 2017 or so. So do check that out, norcalptac.org/webinars. If you are not in our service area and you're starting to get stressed out that you don't have access to these great services, don't worry. First of all, everything on the website, completely free and available to you. You can access that. Second of all, there's PTAC spread across the whole country. So we are one PTAC of 94 across the country. And we are all free or low cost to small businesses like you. So you can find your local PTAC at aptac-us.org/find-a-PTAC. Recommend and go ahead and you can also just Google your location and then type in PTAC or Procurement Technical Assistance. We are partnered in this event with the Norcal SBDC, that's the Small Business Development Center. They are a nonprofit network made up of 18 centers, a very large network in this country that are dedicated to helping small businesses with every aspect of business creation, growth, management, operation. So PTAC, we help specifically with procurement technical assistance. SBDC, they do all sorts of things. So they can actually help you if you're not quite ready to bid with the government. Oftentimes we'll get startup applicants, and we do not accept startup applicants, but we recommend that you work with the SBDC, get your business plan together, get your show on the road, get a couple quarters of sales under your belt, and then come talk to us. We'll get you all ready when it's time to start putting some energy into getting your certifications. The SBDC is a great resource for getting to that point. You can find your local SBDC by clicking on that link or simply Googling it. And like I said, it's free or no cost. So you can go ahead and find them as well. You can see their service area on the right. unlike us, they include a lot of these inland counties, including the Sacramento area. So do take a look at them. Both of our organizations have COVID-19 resources for you to check out as well, both responding to the pandemic in terms of helping and how to adapt to the difficulties that the pandemic has presented to everyone in this past year or so. So thank you for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started now. I will hand things over to Ed Duarte. Like I said, he is our procurement specialist. If you have any questions during the presentation, put them in the Q&A window. We have a chat and a Q&A. The chat is for networking, technical questions, issues like that. If you want to say something else, if you want a question read aloud during the Q&A, put it in the Q&A feature. And like I said, we're being recorded right now, and the video and the slides will be provided on our website and emailed to you later today, norcalptech.org/webinars. All right, it is time for the main event. Take it away, Ed. Thanks once again for putting all this together.
Thank you, James. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be talking today about managing your first public works contract. As James mentioned, we do quite a bit of counseling and contract assistance for different businesses. My specialty happens to be in the construction arena because I'm a retired civil engineer and general contractor. In fact, our family business is still operational with the third generation now, my son running the company. Our background has always been public works. So when I started teaching these workshops about 25 years ago, I found that with a lot of the smaller companies, particularly the subcontractors and the general and startup general contractors, having come, if they came from the residential market and started to bid and build in the public arena, a lot of them had a lot of problems because it is so completely different. So everything that we're going to talk about today, we've developed over 35 years around here in the Bay Area and working with dozens and dozens of public agencies, everybody from Caltrans and BART, water districts, sewer districts, school districts, etc. So with that, having said that, let's move forward and keep on going. As I said, we're going to be talking about what are you going to run into when you get your first project. A lot of the diversity outreach for DBEs to participate in the public works arena, rightfully so, a lot of it, first of all, is getting certified. And that absolutely needs to be done. If you qualify financially and contractually as a DBE, it's to your benefit to get certified. And that's when you would meet with our people here and go through that process. However, in the public works arena, getting certified does not guarantee any contract awards to you. You have to join into the process just like any other contractor. The difference is that you will be given fair consideration provided you meet all of the requirements from the industry side. And that is a whole other ballgame. So if you've gone through that process and you've learned how to bid these projects and you have your first award, whether you're a prime or whether you're a sub, and I'll have to be talking to both primes and subs during the entire 2 hours that we're going to be talking. In the public arena, believe it or not, I use the word typical because they pretty much are all run the same way from a standpoint of procedures, policies, industry practice. It's pretty much the same with every agency. And there's a reason for that. And that's because the plans and specifications that are prepared by the engineers and architects, they follow a specific format. And because of the California Public Contract Code, there's requirements that apply to any public agency that has tax money in their capital program to award these construction contracts. So we're going to talk about preparing for the pre-construction conference. We're going to talk about your contract administration team. We're going to talk about understanding mobilization procedures, and in other words, to establish a good project management practices. It's very important that both the primes and the subs learn how this process works. Next, please. The first thing after you get your contract, if you're a prime, what you have done at this point is you've bid the job, you've been awarded the project. Go back. You've been awarded the project, and you've furnished your bonds, and you've signed the contract. And the pre-construction conference will be the first item of business for a prime contractor. Well, what happens at the pre-construction? It's the kickoff meeting. And in attendance, you'll have the prime, key subs, the owner's rep, which could be a construction management company, inspectors, testing lab, and the designer, either an engineer or an architect or both. So everyone brings their key player to the meeting. They introduce themselves around and their respective role. What am I going to be doing as the resident engineer? What am I going to be doing as the prime's superintendent? What am I going to be doing as I'm the biggest subcontractor on the job, and this is my superintendent? So everybody gets to know everybody and what their responsibilities are. The lines of communication are established, safety programs reviewed, and I don't have to tell any of you now that how COVID has affected all of us. So every pre-con meeting now has a complete set-aside bullet point just to talk about COVID safety protocol and procedures. There's an administrative protocol and chain of command that's always followed. And in a nutshell, it's the prime has the contract with the owner. The owner does not legally does not have any, will not have any contact with the subcontractors unless the owner's staff on site allow that. I've seen over the years, I've seen different levels of following that protocol. We've run on some jobs where the resident engineer says, I don't want to talk to any subs. They work for you. I have nothing, no communication. I don't want to hear from them. If they have a question, they come through you. And then we've worked for other owners reps who encourage that the subcontractors be involved in all meetings and communication memos. It depends on the personality and the policy typically for that particular agency and their project managers. But in essence, what I tell a lot of my attendees in these classes, as subcontractors, I'm talking to you subs, you don't legally exist. You are working for, in the eyes of the owner, you are working for the prime. Your contract is not with BART or Caltrans or the water district or the sewer district. Your contract is with the prime. And we'll talk about that a little more. The inspector and the testing lab they'll introduce themselves and they'll reiterate what the specifications already define as what's going to be the inspection and testing procedures. And then usually the last thing on the order of business is the prime will have brought to the meeting their first draft of the schedule. And everybody will take a look at it, and hopefully that schedule was put together with some input from the key subcontractors. But essentially, it is the prime's responsibility to develop the schedule. The architect, engineer, or the CM will review the schedule, and they will approve it for the first month. And then thereafter, the schedule has to be updated every single month. So that's the key bullet points that will occur on the agenda for a pre-construction conference with all the players in attendance. This happens obviously before any ground is broken. Next. So let's talk about you primes. You need to set up your necessary administrative group and assignments. You're going to have a project manager. You're going to have a job site superintendent. You need a project engineer and or a contract administrator in the office for payroll and following the pay requests, any kind of correspondence that's going to occur. Someone has to be in charge of that. The next thing you'll do is prepare the schedule of values, and that includes input from the subs. Schedule of values is public works engineer talk for cost breakdown. You need to have a cost breakdown so that you can set up the billing procedure. If you're bidding for a Caltrans project, they have bid items, and that automatically gives you your cost breakdown. If you're bidding for a building project like a school building or a fire station or a police station, your price was probably submitted as a lump sum price, and you're going to have to give them a breakdown of what each portion of the work is valued. And I'll go over that in detail later. Finalize the CPM schedule, the critical path method, which is will vary from different owners to from one owner to another owner. What we found over the years is that two software programs have become dominant in the industry. There are more than two, but the two big players for the jobs, an arbitrary limit, and that's been kind of set by the industry itself. At 20 million and under, Microsoft Project will handle just about any type of project that you want to schedule for. So up to about 20 million, Microsoft Project is usually the choice of software. At 20 million and over, I would say 80% of the owners prefer Primavera. It's called Primavera P6, which is it's just the name of the software program. It's expensive, costs between $5,000 and $7,000 for the software, and the training to learn how to use it is about $1,500 a week. And you have to go for 2 weeks, depending on your level of expertise with other software. But in a nutshell, the CPM schedule will be prepared by the prime. It should include input from the subs, and Microsoft Project and Primavera are the two programs of choice for over 90% of public works owners. As a prime, you'll begin writing your subcontracts and your purchase agreements. In reality, as soon as we are low bidder, and we've attended the bid, we send our bid runner in with our proposal, and they open the bids, and we see that we're low, and we wait 3 days to make sure that we're not being protested by the second low bidder or the third low bidder. We'll talk to the owner's rep and say, does this project, we see it's within your budget, and we see it's probably going to be he said, yeah, we're going to be recommending award. At that point, we already start writing subcontracts and purchase agreements. We try to get a jump on things. We will prepare a master submittals log and distribute that with our subcontract. And that schedule, that schedule needs to be a part of your critical path project schedule, because the submittals process, as we get into discuss that, is so key in public works that it gets its own schedule. As a prime, you start enforcing the submittal deadlines from the subs and set up and review your mobilization plan to move on site and start moving dirt around and start the project. Next. So our family has always said the first rule for the job site is know the plans and specs for your scope of work. If you're the prime, the buck stops with you, and you need to know that job backwards and forwards, because you are the sole entity that's responsible to the owner for completion of the project. It's your job to make sure that all the subs know what they're doing and build the project in accordance and in compliance with plans and specs. So when I say know the plans and specs for your scope of work, I really mean exactly that. You need to, if you ask around to any contractor that's been doing this type of work, that has been doing it successfully for several years, you'll find that when they get an award, they've read those plans and specifications backwards and forwards, and they know the job as good or better than the design engineer and as good or better than the inspectors. Because if you don't, you will pay a price for that. So now, using that same comment for you subcontractors, because you're only responsible for your portion of the work, and depending on the size of your subcontract and the size of the scope of the work that you're going to be doing, it's sometimes a little too convenient to send your foreman or your supervisor out to the job site with 1 or 2 people to do your subcontract work. And you haven't briefed them. You haven't checked to make sure that they know the plans and specs as well as you do. Again, I'm talking to you subcontractors. I can't tell you how many times we've had a subcontractor's foreman come on the job, and when we start to meet with him and tell him, okay, here's what you're going to be doing, this person doesn't have a clue what they're doing. They've just been told, get your paint buckets and go out there, you're going to go paint that building. For your own safety and your own financial well-being, subcontractors, if you're not doing the supervision yourself and managing your crew, you need to make sure your supervisor, foreman, whatever, that's running your portion, your work, you need to make sure that they know what they're doing. Both prime and sub obviously monitor job progress to stay on schedule. Make sure that job is properly staffed. For you primes, keep efficient control of subs and suppliers. Prepare a checklist of procedures for field crew. Obviously, that comment applies to both the prime and subs. And finalize the selection of your crew size. And remember, your crew size and the time allotted to do the work, it needs to be a reflection of how you bid the job. That's why it's important that communications during the bidding process between subs and generals is important, so that everybody's on the same page from a general perspective, to make sure that, you know, let's say you're an electrician and you're used to doing $100,000 subcontract, and you just simply put 2 people out there and they stay as long as it takes. Well, maybe this $100,000 contract is for a school building that has to be built in 90 days. You're not going to be able to do your work and keep out of everybody, ahead of everybody, with 2 people. And maybe it needs to be 4 people. And if you didn't bid it that way, you're up a creek. Next. I spent a few minutes on the previous slide talking about making sure that subs come out totally prepared. Those comments are a precursor to what we now have our pre-con meetings. Over the years, both the owners reps, and the primes got kind of tired of dealing with subcontractors who came out and did not know what they were going to do, or didn't know the protocols, or didn't know the processes and the policy and the chain of command, et cetera. Now what you find in most larger public works contracts is a clause that says the prime shall conduct a subcontractor pre-construction meeting. Every sub, you will meet with them individually, and you'll do the following. You're going to review their contract and scope of work, their submittals requirement, their portions of the schedule, go over the QA, QC procedures, review the safety program protocols, and remind them of the chain of command. It's become standard operating procedure to have subcontractor pre-construction meeting. So for you generals, if you're bidding a job that, say, I'll just pick a number, say 5 million and up as a prime contract, the chances are 98% that your contract's going to have a clause requiring you to conduct subcontractor pre-construction meetings. And for you subcontractors, be aware that that's what they're going to talk about, and that's what they're going to cover, and you need to comply. We have a slide that's coming up for Q&A, but I've touched on some pretty important items here. Are there any questions at this point in time? That I'm going out a little out of sequence, James, but sometimes I go over this stuff so fast that people have questions and they might forget about them. So are there any questions on what I've covered so far?
Once again, if you do have a question, you can enter it into the Q&A window of Zoom here, and Ed will read them aloud and answer them for everybody. I don't currently see any questions, so we'll just wait a little bit. Well, maybe we can keep the ball rolling, and if they have questions, we can pause later.
Yeah, let's go on to the next one. Okay, as a project manager, again, from the general perspective, the prime, this is your typical key tasks that the project manager will be responsible for. Some they can delegate downward to a project engineer or to a contract administrator. But these are the bullet points covering the tasks that need to be developed and executed. Excuse me. Again, the schedule of values, which is the cost breakdown. And I have, when we get to our handouts, I'll show you how those work. But you can't bill for your work if there isn't a cost breakdown. And every single public works contract will have listed in Division 1, general conditions. They will have a policy procedure that defines how they want to see the schedule of values prepared. Again, as I said earlier, as a prime, it's your job to put together the schedule. In our company, our project managers and project engineers are all well-versed in the software, and they put together the schedule. That schedule we send with our subcontract to the subcontractors and have them look at it and say, you see that we've got you scheduled for the 12th week, and we've allotted six working days for your piece of the work. Is that sufficient? And if they say yes, great. If they say no, well, we'll say, well, okay, how how much time do you need? Well, we really need 7 days. Probably not an issue. If you say, no, I need 3 weeks there, we're gonna have to sit down and talk, because there's no way that we can allow you to have that amount of time and still finish on time, the overall project. So that will require another meeting between prime and sub. You need a submittals log for tracking the submission of all the submittals, the turnaround time, the approvals and the substitutions, et cetera. There's a whole process for that. And I've got a document that will show you a sample log that will show you how you can track that. You need a safety program. For you prime contractors, depending on the agency, the safety program can get very explicit from what we used to call tailgate meetings. And literally sit on the tailgate of the pickup out at the job site and have the crew stand around. So he goes over scaffold requirements, ladder requirements, eyeglass protection, et cetera. Well, like everything else in this business, the interjection of insurance and liability and attorney language in the contracts, we've evolved. Safety programs now can involve the preparation of a 10-page booklet and 2 hours of scheduled classes on everything from COVID to enclosed space to fall protection. I mean, safety program cost in a bid, you need a line item for that. And B, if the job's $5 million and up, it's going to be several $1,000s, maybe on up to $10,000 or $12,000 for the cost of putting on a safety program for you as a prime. For you subcontractors, you won't have to put that safety program together, but you will need to be, you'll need to have your people comply with it. There will be project meetings. Again, that will be set up during the pre-con meeting, and that will be an agreement. For the big jobs, they typically meet at minimum twice a month, every other week, depending on the complexity and the size of the project. It's not unusual to see project meetings occur every week. And that needs to be a part of your bid. Request for information, RFIs. The single most used document out in the project. And that is the request that a sub will turn into a prime, and or the prime will turn into the owner on behalf of themselves or on behalf of a sub, asking a question. I see from the detail on sheet number 7, detail B4, this connection, but blah, 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 it doesn't make sense, or whatever, or we don't understand what you want here. Please clarify. That's an RFI. I mentioned on last week that the Metro's Transportation Center, the $4 billion project that was built in downtown San Francisco, they had 14,000 RFIs. That's how many questions the contractors had of the designers. As an aside, going off on a tangent here, the more RFIs there are on a project, the more indicative they are of the deficiencies in the drawings. And that's a subject for another lecture. Your superintendent is usually the one that's going to set up the meetings with the owner's rep and schedule the inspections. The payment applications, we usually hand that over to our contract administrator after the project engineer has prepared them. If the application, if you bid on a job, that's what we call, there are two types of projects out there. There's typically what we call heavy civil, which is all roadway projects, water and wastewater treatment plants, bridges, Caltrans highways, etc. Those bid forms, those bid proposals have a list of bid items. And the bigger the job, the more bid items. When you have the bid items, that automatically is your cost breakdown. And it's done on a lump sum basis, a percentage basis, or a unit price basis. But it's already broken down. For buildings, school buildings, fire stations, police stations, office buildings, typically we submit our bid in one lump sum price. My bid is $2.5 million to build this child care center. When we bid on a lump sum basis, we owe the owner a cost breakdown to define each portion of the work and its applied value. Change orders. I think everybody in the world is familiar with the term change orders. Well, in public works, they're a big deal, and they're very well, the owners are very well protected to the point of, I don't know of any contract out there on the street for a public agency that doesn't have a change order clause that specifies the markup that subs are allowed to put on the work, on the change order work, and specifies the markup that the prime can put on the subs cost. It's very defined. So unless you're in the mega projects like Caltrain and the high-speed rail, change orders are usually never for the benefit of the contractor. And depending on the militant attitude of the construction manager, it can be a very sore point of conflict between the contractor and the owner. And again, that'll be a function of the quality of the drawings. And closeout procedures. Given that everything else is so formal, it's not too surprising that just to close out a project, we now have very defined procedures and requirements that the contractor, the prime, has to follow in order to close out the project. Next. Okay. I had a question from Latonia. Yes, all of those submittals, all of those handouts will be provided. First, before you get them, I'm gonna go over every single one to give you an example of how they're used. But you will be getting copies of all the handouts.
Should we review them now?
Okay, let's start with number one. The first one is a purchase agreement. Well, what the heck do I mean when I say a purchase agreement? Why can't I just write a PO? Because if you write a simple one-page carbon copy purchase order, like most of us are familiar with for simple purchases, that's not going to protect you on a public works agreement. A public works contract has requirements that the specified equipment has to meet. And so you need something stronger than a purchase order. And if you look at the website of all the major general contractors, that are bidding public works, you're going to find that the majority of them have on their website their sample purchase agreement. And this is what is going to be used when they buy any, we'll use the word major piece of equipment that is to be incorporated into the project. The example I'm showing here is to the vendor, petroleum contractors, and it is for a fire station. It is to supply, furnish, and install an above-ground diesel fuel storage and fuel dispensing system, a fuel tank, and a system for dispensing fuel at the fire to the fire trucks. Well, if you could scroll on down that slowly, James. It describes the piece of equipment. This one has a disclaimer. Note, the fuel storage tank being proposed by Balch Petroleum is not manufactured by the company specified on the bid documents. Balch Petroleum is expected to make formal requests for substitution of an or equal product. And they are expected to provide whatever documentation to satisfy the city of Newark and the A&E that the modern welding superior tank is of equal design, manufacture quality, etc. In other words, they bid something that was not specifically called out in the specs. So they're taking a chance that this is going to get, however, because of the confidence they have in their product and having, they did it for many other fire stations, they're not worried about it. So that language is in there to protect me as a prime. This is going to be one of my subcontractors. And I highlighted, furnish all necessary shop drawings, submittals, and O&M manuals per plans and specs, and price to include all taxes and freight delivery to the job site. Exclusions. Well, they're not going to install it. We'll install it. We're going to do the concrete pad, the generator, power conduit, and fuel, the emergency to fill the tank and start it up and test it. Our electrical sub and ourselves, we will take care of all that. They're merely to furnish it. So there's the payment terms, and then there's the signature page. So as you can see, this in essence is a miniature subcontract. It's a short form subcontract, and most primes, we call it a purchase agreement or a vendor's agreement. And it simply ties that vendor to the same requirements that we are. That includes the schedule. They can't tell me in the middle of the job that, oh, you know what, something happened, we can't bring this fuel tank for the date that we promised. It's going to have to be 3 months later. Well, that's not going to work. So we provide in there in that flow down clause to them, the payment terms agrees with all of the requirements that are in the general conditions, including liquidated damages. So, and over the years, we haven't had to do it too many times, but our company has had to assess back charges to vendors who deliver equipment late. Let's go to number 2. You can close those two, James. Okay. Submittals. What is a submittal? Okay, in simple terms, even though the specifications and the drawings are supposed to tell us everything of what we want, the submittal process evolved, I don't know, 100 years ago. And what it is the architect engineer is telling us, yes, I told you what I wanted. Now give me proof that you are going to do and submit and provide what I wanted. So we have to turn in spec sheets, shop drawings, demolition procedures, product data, samples, mock-ups, manufacturer's instructions, manufacturer certificates, as-built, O&M, everything that requires that the architect engineer wants to confirm that you are doing the job per plans and specs. It all has to be double documented by the process called submittals. So we will turn those in, and since there are so many on virtually every project, that's why you need that tracking log to do it. And this handout, if you can scroll down through it slowly, James. It defines for you exactly what submittals are. You keep on going. It's a very complete document, and it gives you literally everything you need to know how and why submittals are important. And at the end, I say, nothing works faster to set a negative tone from the owner as to having a project manager who appears to have this process, not have this process under control. It's evolved to the point that the specs will say, if you don't have an approved submittal, you're installing that particular piece of work at risk. So the suppliers have learned that over the years too. So a supplier won't even begin manufacturing that piece of equipment until they have received an approved submittal from the A&E firm. Now, concurrently with that, and this is a management tip to both you primes and subs, is that, yeah, that's a huge risk element that we have to manage. However, when an A&E firm takes an unreasonable amount of time above and beyond what they are allowed in the plans and specs, the specs will say A&E has up to 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 30 days, usually never more than 30 days, to review and turn around a submittal. If they don't do that, then they're in violation of the contract. So the turnaround time needs to be tracked. And that is your responsibility. So that'll take us right next to the submittals log. Okay. Here's the log that you as a prime need to prepare. Submittal number, the spec section, the description of what it's about, the latest date needed, the date received from the sub, the date sent to the architect, the date returned from the architect, the turnaround time returned to the sub, the date it was sent back to the sub, and what was the action. APP is approved, no exception taken is kind of approved, approved as noted, or amend and resubmit. So all of those dates need to be tracked, and a good project manager for a prime needs to do that. Now, for you subcontractors, obviously you're not going to have this many submittals to track. You might have 2, maybe 3, possibly 4. But I would submit that you should prepare a little log yourself. Yours will be very simple to keep. And it would be the same thing. It's the date. Instead of receiving, if you're a subcontractor, yours would read received from vendor, submitted to prime, returned from prime, turnaround time. Why all this emphasis on the tracking of the dates? Well, the sad comment, but the reality is that these projects are can be so complex, and they're so steeped in bureaucracy and red tape and formality that disputes quite often arise. And if they do, the attorneys will tell you, he who has the most paper wins. So it's all about documentation, documentation, documentation. If you have a very simple, clear log like this, detailing the progress of the submittal of your particular submittal, whether it's a shop drawing or manufacturer specs or a panel schedule if you're an electrician, equipment schedule if you're a mechanical contractor, or if you're the prime and it's for a generator or a compressor. As long as these go in and the dates are tracked and the turnaround time is within the contract time allowed to the A&E firm, then we're all good. As soon as they take too long, like item number 8, the A&E took 66 days to return that submittal for plumbing. Part of it was due to the fact that portions of the submittal, of the plumbing submittal, were not approved. Part of them had to be resubmitted, but 66-day turnaround time, that definitely could impact the schedule. So I really can't emphasize how important a submittal log is for a prime contractor. Now, let me take a sidebar here for a second. We talk about the CPM schedule, Primavera or a Microsoft project, as being the software. When I started in the business, there was no software for doing this. So this document here that I've prepared, we built this ourselves. This template is an Excel spreadsheet. And for those of you who are familiar with Excel, you know that you can put a formula in there at the turnaround time and it will subtract the date received from the date returned. And it will automatically post the 22-day turnaround time. So literally all you do is manual entries, piece from sub, submitted to the architect, returned from the architect. The turnaround time is generated automatically, and then you post when you return it. As I said, when we started in the business, there was no software. It was just beginning. Nowadays, I'll be the first to tell you that there are project management software programs, dozens of them. And for you subcontractors, you will have to utilize the one that your prime uses. And for you primes, you should have your own, and also be aware that some agencies impose their own PM, project management tracking management program, software program, and you have to comply with that. East Bay Mud uses what they call eDocs, and it's a very, I don't care for it, but it's what they use. What you're going to find is that the vast majority of the generals who are out there bidding jobs at $1 million and up, they are already using project management software. So this log is already set up in that software. I'm showing this to you as a guideline. And if you're not using project management software and you want to have a log, here's a template for you. It's there for your information. That what's important about it is what it's showing you and what it does. Next one. Here we have a typical CPM schedule. This one's done on Microsoft Project. And simply it takes a bar chart to the next level. And over on the left are the list of tasks. Over on in the middle is the predecessor, which is the event that needs to occur before the percentage complete, the duration of the task, the start date, the finish date, and the percentage complete. And then over here, it prints it out as a flow chart that shows the progress of the work. I'm not going to go into this any more depth than that, other than to say this is your typical schedule that will be required on every project. If you're the prime, it's your responsibility. If you're the sub, you need to examine that schedule and take a look at your window of work and make sure you can get it done in that amount of time, because this schedule will be built to complete the job in the number of days that are allotted in the specifications. In other words, the contract allowance time. Next. Continuing on with schedules, a lot of superintendents will tell you, yeah, the CPM schedule is great for the big picture. It looks great up on the wall of the trailer, of the job site trailer, but we manage our job with 3-week look-aheads. And a 3-week look-ahead is nothing more than a simple little Excel template that shows 3 weeks of dates. In this case, is November 7th through December 2nd. And those 3 weeks with weekends and holidays highlighted, it shows who's going to be on site doing what. And most superintendents have this in their back pocket or on their tablet, so that they know, they can, at a glance, they can see who's doing, who's supposed to be in site and what they're doing. Obviously, the bigger the job, the more complicated the 3-week look ahead. It's become such an effective tool that, again, you will see this in the specifications under scheduled, where they'll say, in addition to the CPM schedule, the prime shall furnish weekly 3-week look aheads. Next one. If you don't already have an RFI template, this is a classic, simple example that just about everybody uses. If you go from contractor to contractor, they take the formatting and they customize it to match their preference. But essentially, you have a logo, you'll have a name for the job address, the RFI number, the date, to so-and-so, from so-and-so, reference what particular spec section, what's the subject, and then you type in the question. Scroll down, James, please. Replies requested by, area of work affected, and the schedule impact. Type in a couple of sentences there. And then at the bottom, there's a place for the A&E firm to type their response. And then they have to sign it and date it. Very simple. This is a template. You should design your own, put it up on Microsoft Word or Excel, whatever suits your fancy. Or if you're using a project management software, they already have an RFI because it is standard operating procedure in all public works contracts. Next. There's the log. Same principle as the submittals log. There's a description: uncovered 3 1-inch diameter conduit, So we sent it to the architect on April 27. We needed an answer that day. Date we got it back, 7-day return. The job was not fun. Very slow in response time. So eventually that job happened to finish a little over the completion date, and we had to show that the refusal to answer key RFIs on time affected the schedule. Therefore, we got a time extension. Next. Daily diaries and field messages. Well, now we have tablets and iPhones, so that has become a much simpler process. Typically, what we do on our projects, if it's a big enough project where we have a younger project engineer on the job site, it's their job to do the daily diary. And the information, the minimum information, scroll down please, is who's on site, number of workers, the weather, what equipment, any deliveries, any visitors, any accidents are noted in our daily diary, plus the actual accident report, and no-shows. So I put an exclamation for no-shows. Why would you guess that I would emphasize that? Again, it's documentation, folks. Those schedules are set in concrete, pardon the pun. If we finish late, we're going to get assessed damages, liquidated damages. So for me as a prime, if I've scheduled the drywaller to be there and they have 3 weeks work for this large building, or maybe 4 weeks, and they show up 5, 6, 7 days late to start their work, they've impacted us by at least a week, if not 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, because remember, we had the electrician and the plumber doing the rough-in, and then we're going to cover it up with sheetrock. So even more important, say the plumber's late or the electrician is late. So when we have a no-show, we log it in our daily diary, because if you wind up holding me up and we get delayed, I'm probably going to backcharge you, depending on the cost impact that your delay provided because you didn't show up when you were supposed to. So any prime worth their salt will document no-shows. Conversely, if you're a sub and you're faithfully showing up all the time doing your work, and you get this email that says, now don't forget, you got to be out here in a week from Monday, and we expect you to come out here with a full crew and all your equipment and go to work. Great. Monday comes around and you show up with 5 people and equipment, and guess what? The prime isn't ready for whatever reason. Maybe it's a prime's fault. Maybe it's another sub's fault. You need to document that to cover your, you know what, because you responded to the schedule as requested and as shown, but they weren't ready for you. So you need to document that, because you're probably, the schedule is going to slip, but it wasn't your fault. You showed up on time, ready to go to work. Daily diaries are, I can't emphasize how important they are. They need to be kept on a daily basis. And again, it goes back to the attorney's comment. He or she who has the most documentation and the most paper will win the dispute. And daily diaries are a key component of a contractor's arsenal of documentation. Next. There's a template. We used to have a much longer one, and then the superintendent said, oh, there's way too much information here. We need to boil it down. So we got it down to 1 page. And again, you don't have to write a novel. You just put down the key items. But everything's there that a person needs to know. And with software, and especially with Excel, you can repopulate this thing with all the key data. You don't need to write in the name of the project and the location and who the every single day. Have them made up, have it on a template with all that stuff already filled in. All you need to type in is the time, the temperature, the staff, and what subs are there. And you can reduce the amount of time you spend on a report. The important thing is that you do a daily report. Next. As I said earlier, hang on, I need to get a drink of water. Hang on. If you're bidding a Caltrans job or a job for the county, and it's a roadway job, you're going to have bid items, and that's your billing procedure. What I've shown you here is a typical cost breakdown for a lump sum job. In this case, happens to be a fire station. And there's the breakdown of, if you could scroll down through that real slow, James. A breakdown of all the components of work: general conditions, cost for mobilization, bonds and insurance, hazmat remediation, demolition, underground utilities, fences and gates, masonry, carpentry, keep on going. Goes into the second page. Still under the base contract, aluminum windows, specialties, laundry, kitchen equipment, plumbing, HVAC, keep on going. And getting that down to electrical. Now, it's important to stop, back up, center that one. A little more, right there. All right. So this form is an AIA, American Institute of Architects. It's a standard form. Again, software, there's software out there that can do this for you. All you have to do is type in the values. And this format is an industry-wide recognized standard template that every general contractor uses for lump sum projects. And then the cost breakdown is that. It's important to remember in those values that we've shown on the first column, that 121,000, the barracks generator, that value has my total markup, my profit and overhead included. So that when I get to the bottom and I've reached the end of the cost breakdown, that 1,278,50, that's my contract amount. Okay, we don't put our true costs out on the left. We put our cost plus our markup, because I'm going to be billing on this every month. Now go back up to the first page, James, please. So in the previous period, there we will enter a percentage complete, and that will kick out a dollar value, and then it will be, the same thing happens for this period, and then there's a to date amount. And after you do the first one, there will be entries all the way across the board. For the first month, it'll be just this period. There won't be a previous period. There'll be just this period for month number 1. By the way, I say month because all public works jobs are billed monthly in arrears. In other words, you submit a bill on May 1st for the work done in April. And then the owner has 30 days to pay you. And there's no upfront money, folks, no deposits. Okay, so scroll down. And that's the setup. All right, let's go to the next one. Now we have one that shows entries. So on general conditions, I'm 25% complete. So I'm billing for 25% on general conditions. I'm billing for mobilization as 95% complete. And I'm billing for the bonds. I furnished them right at the beginning. I'm 100% complete. This is all during the first month. And I did my hazmat, I did my demo, I did my clear and grub, I did my building pads. They're all 100%. Those values, those percentages times the schedule value in column C, they kick out the contract amount. And since it's the first, this happens to be application number 5 up on top. This is the 5th month. You can see what I've done previously, and you can see what I've done total to date. So when you go down to the bottom of this one, you can see that the total sheets, it shows that I'm looking for a progress payment of $402,085, and I'm 51% complete. By the time the 5th month came around, we also had change orders that were added. They deleted some work and they added some work. They factor right in. It looks complicated, but the templates are already set up. The formulas are already set up. There's software out there that has these, and all you have to do is fill in the column at the left and then do the percentages complete each month. By the way, those percentages are done by the prime, but they have to be approved by the inspectors / owner's rep. So one little key point I want to remind all of you subcontractors is that, and this happens all the time, is that the cutoff date is typically the 25th of the month. And on the 25th of the month, if you have a big payday for that month, I would suggest that you make it out to the job site and walk it with the prime and superintendent and the inspector and tell them, I'm going to be billing for 70% of my plumbing. I'm going to be billing for 50% of my electrical, and make sure that they buy off on it. Because if you just simply send in an invoice and you bill for X amount, X percentage, equaling X dollars, and that's not what the inspector allowed, your progress payment ultimately that you get, the check that you get, is not going to match your billing, and your books are going to get screwed up. I can't tell you how often that happens. It happens all the time, all the time. The owner is going to pay whatever their owner's rep, inspector, CM, whatever they decide is appropriate and correct. That may or may not agree with you as a subcontractor on the amount of percent that they're allowing for your progress payment. So in order to eliminate that confusion and dispute, and heartache, because if you don't participate and make sure that your amount that you're billing is approved, you're going to get a check that's smaller than what you expected, and your bookkeeper is going to be very unhappy with you. All right, next. Okay, let's, James, let's go back to the slides, and we're going to have to come back to these. These are covered under change orders. Thank you. The last item I'm going to talk about is change orders and claims and disputes. So it's important that both prime and sub recognize the changes and their effect. I'll talk a little bit about types of claims and things we can do to avoid disputes and preventing practices. Next. Change order protocol, again, it is the same virtually for every agency out there. You take a look at any public works contract, go to the general conditions in Division 1 and look under the paragraphs of change orders, and you're going to see virtually the same thing on every contract for every owner. The procedures and policies are in the spec. They and you will be identifying the types of contractor or client claims of scope change. It's important that at the pre-con meeting, who can authorize any changes? Don't fall into the trap of inspectors have an unhappy record of trying to run jobs. That's not their authority. That's not their job. And some of them get what we in the industry, we call it a Napoleonic complex. Only an designated owner's rep, like an A&E or a CM, can authorize a change order. And some owners say nobody can authorize a change order except staff at the agency. Depends. You need to realize the effect of change orders on schedule and performance, negotiation methodology, change order pricing, proper documentation of changes to the work, labor and materials. Next. Okay, there's types of change orders. The simple one, the one that makes everybody happy, is the owner says, I want to add some more square footage, so I'm going to add one more bay to the building. They tell the architect or the engineer to draw up an addition to the building or an expanded space, or upgrade the space, or whatever. Or they want to delete work. We want to delete custom cabinets, and we want to go with cheap cabinets. In any case, they're telling you exactly what they want as an extra or as a deduct. So that's simple. The next one's not so simple. The change of work is triggered by faulty design issue. And as I've said in many of my workshops, it's a very, very touchy subject with designers, with architects and engineers. Of course, they don't like to admit that their drawings are less than perfect. The simple fact of the matter is they are very often are deficient. And you as a contractor, you need to point that out as early as possible, hopefully during the bidding stage, but you only have a couple of weeks to prepare your bid and examine the drawings. They've had six to 9 months to prepare these drawings. So it isn't always picked up before the bid. Request by contractor for time extension for weather, extra time for added scope, schedule delay due to an outside entity, or the CM, the designer, failure to address a problem. Claim by contractor for added expense due to force majeure. COVID is a good example. That worked during last year in 2020. very, very quickly, the owners recognized the impact that was having. So all projects that are out on the street right now, I'd be very surprised if they don't have a clause that disqualifies COVID expense from your bid. In other words, you better have COVID protocol policy costs included in your price. You're not going to get a change order because you have to have 27 hand cleaning stations and 400 masks and separate training for COVID protocol. You're not going to get a change order for that, if any, for the contracts that are being issued out on the street right now. Most of the owners are smart enough to have picked that up. And then the last one is the worst. Whatever the dispute may be, whether it's time extension, whether it's this thing caused me to spend more money to do the work because your drawing was bad, whatever the dispute might be, the contractor submits a claim and it's denied. And because the dollars are big, we're going to go to court. So that's the ultimate bad result. Unfortunately, the only people that win in those cases are the attorneys. But to show you how bad it can be, as I mentioned on last Thursday, and I mentioned a minute ago about the 14,000 RFIs that were done to the Metropolitan Transportation Center downtown San Francisco. The general contractor joint venture on that project has filed a claim against the owners for $150 million. That's how bad they say malfeasance on the part of the designers and poor drawings contributed to extra costs. So they're suing the city of San Francisco and Metro Transportation. They're suing them for $150 million. Well, I think one thing you could assume that at $150 million, it's hardly a nuisance claim. In other words, there's got to be justification when you're asking for that kind of money. So the point of my comment is that we need to be thoroughly aware of our contract, the scope of work, and if there is cause for some sort of claim, if you don't have all the necessary documentation, you're not going to get paid for that change order. Next. How can an owner and ourselves, what are mitigation measures? Well, a constructability review is essentially a third-party plan check that's done on the drawings before it ever goes out to bid. That's something that never was done prior to 1980 by virtually any agency. Now it's become standard procedure. And I think it's interesting to note that the reason it's become standard procedure is that that agency engineer staff, persons from BART, Caltrans, et cetera, all of these big agencies, they started realizing that the architects and engineers that they were hiring outside weren't always doing a great job of preparing plans and specs. There was a lot of deficiencies for whatever reason. I'm not saying because they're stupid or because they're incompetent, has nothing to do with it. It's just, it happened. Maybe it's poor management of the design process. I don't know. The bottom line is when the plans hit the street and they're turned over to the contractors to bid, that's it. That's what the contractor has to work with. And if there are deficiencies, then the A&Es have to step up and acknowledge that responsibility and go to the owner and say, this request for additional compensation, it's valid. It's valid. And I'm sorry, we screwed up. Trouble is, a lot of A&Es have a real problem with admitting mistakes, but that's not your problem. You just need to be prepared. You can have a thorough discussion of any potential problems and bring them up at the pre-con meeting. A&Es, for those of you who are CMs, or maybe you're with an A&E firm, you get an RFI, answer the question as quickly as possible. Period. Partnering is an important process. And obviously for you contractors, primes and subs, fair pricing, no gouging. You should ask for everything you're entitled to, not a penny less. And you certainly shouldn't be trying to gouge the owner. I'll tell you one thing, you're not going to gouge the owner when it comes to markup, because the markups are already preset in every single contract. That comes as a shock to a lot of new contractors on their first public works job. But you're not going to get fat on change orders, because the markups that most of them give, and I could go down a list of what it doesn't begin to cover what it's costing you. So we don't like change orders. We try to avoid them like the plague. Next. We'll finish this out. Okay, James, if we go back to our last few documents, if you would, please. Extra work. When there is extra work, it's going to be under a unit price or authorized time and material, force account, or under protest. So I've given you a little checklist of things to do for documenting extra work, because as I said, there's going to be more likely, if you have any disputed work, you're going to have to track it and document it and then submit it. And you're going to have all your ducks in a row. So this is a checklist, scroll on down, of to do things that you need to implement if you've got what you think is change order work underway. You need to follow this procedure, which includes the field messages, the documentation, pictures, and a daily extra work report, which is the next item. Next one, James. Number 13. There you go.
Sorry, the Zoom controls are being frustrating right now. It's glitching a little bit, but I'll try to get it working.
Okay. We did not design this, folks. This comes right out of the Caltrans project, man. And we liked it so much that most contractors that I know, they have a version of this because it's so handy. All the standard project data is up on top. And then there's a work performed by, work performed for, the description of the work. And then there's a place to list the equipment, the labor, the hours, materials, and it's done daily. Okay, this is done so that the daily cost of this disputed work or this change order work is recorded down. If you go down to the bottom, we even relieve the reluctancy of the inspector or the resident engineer. They don't want to sign anything that a contractor prepares. Well, they have to sign this one because we're saying right at the bottom, acknowledging for field verification of work effort only. Signature does not authorize approval for payment. I'm not asking you to sign this daily extra work report so that I can say, well, he approved it, I should be paid. No, that's not the purpose of it. The purpose is to say, we did have a backhoe out there for 8 hours. We did have 2 laborers and a bobcat. And we were out there fixing this defective original piece of work that was already installed by someone else. And you asked us to do it, so we're doing it. And I want you to authorize that we were here today doing that work with the resources. And here's the reason for this. If and when a dispute comes up, I said the contractor that has the most documentation wins. Okay. If the dispute comes up and we are now sitting at the table, I want the cost of the work off the table. I.e., in other words, the cost is the cost is the cost. Well, what is the cost? Well, here it is. I've got 6 daily reports. For 6 days, we had this equipment out there at prevailing wages and with the markup allowed on change orders. There, if you add them all together, my total cost was $12,000. And your field rep signed them simply to verify we were there doing it, okay? So the 12 grand, that's off the table. We're not gonna argue about the cost. We're gonna argue, is it a justified extra? Am I entitled to be paid for those 6 days of work? And that will go to the contract and the drawings and the specifications and the field conditions and the photographs and the emails. And we're going to decide, is a contractor entitled or they're not entitled? If after all that evaluation of all that other evidence is that, no, here's a note over here on page 7 that says contractor is expected to allow for rusty valve buried underground at 3 feet, blah, blah, blah. And it's clearly you should have had some money in here to do this. And therefore we are ruling this is not a compensable justified cost. End of discussion. If I want to pursue that matter, then I'm going to have to file a claim and go to mediation, arbitration, or a lawsuit. That's the bad news. If after all of the above, what I just said, they decide, yeah, you're right. There's no way he would have known about this. It is justified. Bang. The 12 grand is here. I don't want to be arguing now, well, it shouldn't have cost you this. You shouldn't have had to do this. We think it should only cost $10,000. No, baloney. Your people have signed tickets that showed we were there doing that. We weren't sitting around with our thumb up or you know what. So the cost of this work is not negotiable. So you either tell me I'm entitled or I'm not entitled. If I'm not entitled, I'll either file a lawsuit or I'll go away with my tail between my legs. If I am entitled, I want the 12 grand. Now, this is a big deal, folks. Daily extra work reports should be always kept anytime you smell a dispute coming up. And it should be in that daily ticket, you should absolutely have the owner sign it. If they don't want to sign it, even though that yellow highlighted statement doesn't satisfy them, tell them then what we do. And we've had CMs and inspectors that say, no, I don't sign nothing. Okay, fine. I'm going to note that in my daily diary, and I'm going to send a copy of the daily diary to the resident engineer, along with a copy of the ticket, along with a comment saying, inspector refused to acknowledge that we had a backhoe and a bobcat and 2 people out there. You have to document all this, folks, because if you expect the owner to be looking out for your interests, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So this ticket, this daily extra work report is a very important, useful tool. And you can use it for a lot of other issues as well. Next. Number 14. Just like the submittals log, just like the RFI log, you need to be tracking your change orders. And you may have a lot of change orders, you might not have any, you might have 1 or 2 or 3. For this particular job that I'm using as an example, we had quite a few. And most of them were approved, not all. A simple log. Again, if you're using project management software, they already will have a sample log prepared. If you don't and you want to make your own, you just do an Excel sheet that does this. And as a subcontractor, you're not going to have very many. As the prime, you could have quite a few, depends on the size of your job. All right, let's go back to this slide, please, on closeout. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but everything is there in Division 1, general conditions. And closing out the project is a very specific process. So just review the specs, understand how important it is to do a rapid closeout, and make sure you establish your own checkoff list. Next. Your best practices will include looking at the punch list procedures. There's as-built drawings. There's O&M manuals. There's warranties and guarantees. There's the building permit checkoffs, the final inspection, notice of completion, filing and clearance of all stop notices. So those are the tasks of the steps that you as a prime need to follow through and make sure. And getting the as-built drawings, you have to get them from your mechanical sub, your electrical sub, your plumbing sub, your landscaping sub, at the very least, plus your own as-built. So, and nowadays, we see almost never anymore do they take paper. So the as-builts have to be put on AutoCAD. And nothing comes free, right? So you need to put an allowance in your bid for the cost of preparing and submitting as-built drawings. O&M manuals can be a very expensive deal for those of you who are doing buildings or water and wastewater treatment plant projects. The O&M manuals can be very extensive. And you don't do them electronically only. You do them electronically and they want hard copy because those manuals are going to be on site with the operations and maintenance people. Collecting warranties and guarantees and as-built from subcontractors can sometimes be problematic. It just requires discipline and requires somebody to completely follow through on that. When you get to your mega-sized contractors like Turner and DevCon, some of them have people that do nothing but close out jobs. They have their own little manual, and they'll go through with what the specs require, and their job is to simply go out and close down the job, and everybody else has moved on to the next project. Next slide. So if we could go back to number 15, James, and then we'll be done. So a long time ago, a lot of my classes, they were asking me, well, what would you recommend? How do I put my company in business and get going and make it happen, make it successful? So I simply put together a little checklist of typical steps that every contractor needs to do who plans on bidding and building public works projects and stay in business. So these are guidelines. Financial preparation, set up books, company books, apply for a line of credit, apply for your insurance, begin your records compilation for applications for bonding. If you're a prime, if you plan on bidding as a general contractor, you will not be able to bid any public works job unless you have a bidding capacity. And it's like a line of credit. If you've never bid a job before, built a public works job as a prime, you have to furnish payment and performance bonds. And that is not your license bond that's up in Sacramento. That's a completely different thing. So you need to apply for bonding, and that's another lecture for another day. Find the projects you're going to bid on. I would join a builder's exchange, check all the websites, network with generals, set up a bid calendar, prepare your scope letter in the proper format, learn how to estimate your project and how to bid the jobs. Keep on going. Got quite a few lists there of things that you need to do for estimating. After you win the job, read the subcontract. If you're a sub, read the subcontract sent to you by the general. If you're a general, you don't have any input on the contract because the owner writes the contract and you get what's in the specs. That's it. We don't get any input on contracts with the owner as a prime. However, I have all kinds of latitude and final control on my subcontracts that I send to my subcontractors. Mobilize and start work, do all the paperwork, get the submittals, don't be the one to hold things up, and then manage the project. And there's all the list of items. So it's just, and then the closeout. There's a lot to do, and it's all sequential. And it simply means that you're going to have to, contracting is literally a 24/7 type of industry. High risk, great rewards if you happen to become profitable, and you can become profitable if you manage things right. So I've touched the highlights. I hope this was helpful. And if there's any Q&A, I'll start looking at them right now.
All right, we do have a Q&A. First, I just want to mention a couple of events that we have coming up. On May 6th, next week, we've got if you're curious about how System for Award Management works, SAM, if you need to do contracting at the federal level, you need a CAGE code through SAM, how to use that. Also, if you are a woman, you own a small business, you might be eligible for the WOSP certification. That's on May 11th. And then we've got a webinar that we partner with the County of Santa Clara on request for quotation and invitation to bid. That's on the 27th. So do take a look at our calendar for more upcoming events. And we have 2 Q&A questions here that have been submitted. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in there. Sorry for the webinar going a bit long. Looks like most of you have stuck around, which I'm glad for. If you do leave, there's going to be a survey at the end, redirected once you leave the webinar. If you could just click on that and tell us what you thought of our event today, that'd be awesome. I'm also sending out an email later today with all of the slides, the video recording, as well as all these PDFs. It's going to be posted to our website, norcalptac.org/webinars. All right. So thanks. And Ed, do you want to take some questions here, or do you want me to read them?
I've got it. Okay, LaTonya, if the sub fails to show up, do I have the option to self-perform and get another sub? Absolutely. There's a process that will be set up in our subcontract that says that if we will give you written notice if it's, I think ours says 48 hours. If you don't show up, you've got 48 hours to show up. If you don't show up, then I have the option of doing either one. I can either bring someone else or I can do it, and it will not be considered a breach of contract. And Lisa asks, do you have layering standards for as-built? We will do the as-built. Typically, we will have them done by an outside resource, and the layering will be whatever that particular A&E firm or the owner requests that they want it done. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I know with AutoCAD that you would impose the layer. I think typically you'd start with your site work first and come up, but I would leave that up to my outside resource. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Again, I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, seems lots of people are saying thanks, and thanks to those of you who are thanking us. Thanks for joining and making this all possible. If I don't see any more questions, then that's great. So like I said, all of these materials will be provided to you later, and please fill out the satisfaction survey if you can. It takes just a second. You can do it anonymously, and hope to see you at future events. And special thanks to Ed Duarte for putting this all together, and for the SBDC for co-sponsoring our event. Have a nice rest of your Tuesday, everyone.
Thanks, James.